1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
All right, we are back. We're going to be talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I still haven't figured out Rumble, so I'm going to have to figure out that dysfunction another day. But a reminder, you guys can get this article as well as all the other articles we've talked about in the second half of our shows completely free on Substack. If you've never used Substack before, it sometimes can be intimidating because it'll be like, subscribe. You can literally click a button and just get around subscribing if you're scared of giving me and Adam your email address. So there really should be no excuse. But if you want to get an email every single day, give us that email. Well, every single weekday, I should say, because we're happy to put together this content. And for me, the second half of these best day evers is really just about going deep on random subject matters. So a lot of us stumble into need ideas, need pieces of content, need opportunities, all these things. And sometimes we just don't really have a platform to explore them, right? Or like, when are you like, can you just naturally segue into a conversation with your friends about a great leadership book that you read? Maybe, depending upon your peer group, but for a lot of us, we don't necessarily get to explore these ideas or concepts. And so for me, that's what's, the second half of this show, Best Day Ever, is all about, is being able to go into those deep dives. Because while it's useful, in my opinion, to kind of go over the 24-hour news cycle, right? Highlight some of the stories, explore them, share my and Adam's opinions, as well as get your guys' opinions on them. I also want to go deeper into certain subject matters because, like that St. Augustine quote, I'm constantly focused on trying to make a better version of Matt McKeever. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm always going to be a work in progress. I regularly struggle with a lot of things, just like a lot of people struggle with a lot of things. We're all human, but there's no reason why we can't be using ourselves as a benchmark or playing golf against ourselves, right? And trying to always get better. So with that in mind, let's pull up our Substack. I'm going to jump into this fantastic leadership book. I was trying to remember who originally put me on to Patrick Lencioni, because he's written an actual entire series of books. But let's jump into this article I put together for you guys on my favorite of his books. My second favorite book of his would be the 5 Temptations of a CEO. I think those two books together, whether you're an old hat when it comes to being a leader, and whether that's as a CEO or just like a functional team leader or department leader, or whether you're just aspiring to become a leader, these books like honestly changed my entire perspective when it comes to being a leader. Most of us, I think, when it comes to leadership, right? Like maybe you're exposed to some great leaders through YouTube videos or, sports figures and things of that nature. But the vast majority of us only can really mimic what we personally experience, right? And if you just like, my personal experience being an accountant and then working in public accounting and things of that nature, you know, accountants aren't natural born leaders. In fact, I don't think a lot of us are natural born leaders, but we can purposely become better leaders. And honestly, I never really experienced great leadership until I quit the corporate world and started working for myself and started meeting fellow entrepreneurs that were actively thinking about this, right? When I was working for the public accounting firm, BDO, essentially like we do things like team building and workshops, but like it was always like a rubber stamp that one of the partners had decided, like maybe their friend was a consultant and had this team building workshop, and they'd be like, yeah, sure, we'll pay you like $5,000, come in here, we'll do a drum circle or whatever. But it wasn't actually about trying to really build better teams and empower your team members. Whereas once I started exploring these books, particularly from Patrick Lencioni, I started to really understand. So in the second half of this discussion, I'm going to get into some of the direct lessons and takeaways that I've implemented in my businesses. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here as some great entrepreneur. You know, referencing back to that third Dark Side of Financial Independence video I shot way back in the day, honestly, like my entire history is just a history of failing forward. So I constantly stumble. I constantly make missteps. I'm constantly wrestling with myself through the lens of hindsight, because I know that I'm capable of so much more, and it frustrates me to no end that I rarely live up to the high standards I set for myself. However, That being said, continuous improvement, right? That's how we're going to build the best day ever. So I want to start off this conversation about the book around a couple of quotes. So first one from Michael Jordan here: talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. And again, there's that classic saying, if you want to uh, go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team. Napoleon Hill: it is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed. I really do think that that's how some of the best leaders are able to tap into their teams and get the most out of them, is by actually being focused on being more of a coach rather than just someone barking from the front or barking from the back for that matter. Um, Final quote from Patrick Lencioni: not finance, not strategy, not technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. That last point's key there. Is honestly, real teamwork is extremely rare. And one of the things I struggled with in several of my businesses is, as far as employees go, we would use my social media as a natural funnel to try and get, the most talented, the most motivated individuals to join businesses like my wholesaling team, right? Now, with that, one thing that I struggled with at the start, and I still struggled till the day that I handed off the business, was trying to get these highly motivated individualists to be in alignment in a team setting. Because a lot of these guys consider themselves like, the killer salesmen, right? They're all focused on being the alpha. And yet you're trying to get them all to pull together, right? To work together as a team, to have that mentality of iron sharpens iron. Whereas a lot of like salespeople really struggle with the understanding of wanting to play on a team, because it's like, hey, if I spend time helping him become better, he's either going to steal deals from me, or I'm just losing out on time that I could be spending getting deals myself. And so we tried playing around with a bunch of different like incentive models and structures and things like that. But I really found that if I wasn't trying to build a strong team culture, if I wasn't, constantly leading by example, that it was all for naught. That I was literally just pissing into the wind at that moment in time. Um, so a question I want to leave you guys with is: have you ever been part of a high functioning team? Have you been on an underperforming team? I suspect that all of us have been on underperforming teams. But I'm willing to bet that a decent number of individuals have never actually been on a high functioning, successful team. And it's really sad, because we can accomplish so much more together when we're able to tap into each other's strengths and pull together. There's that classic saying about Clydesdale horses. I don't remember the exact facts, but let's say a Clydesdale horse by himself can pull 8,000 pounds, but two Clydesdale horses can pull 20,000 pounds. And again, just understanding that, like, we can become more than the sum of our parts. But the only way we do that is through great leadership and great teamwork. So this leadership fable is all about teams and how to bring a dysfunctional group together. Patrick Lencioni creates a fictional story about a struggling team, but the archetypes of team members laid out will be familiar to everyone. Being an effective team leader is not something that comes natural to most of us. It certainly doesn't come natural to me. And if it doesn't come natural to you, don't panic, because that doesn't mean you're destined to be a terrible leader or you could never level up into being a great leader. When I originally was told about this book, I'll be honest, I had some hesitations about consuming it, because I was like, oh, like it's a fable, right? So like he's making up stories, and they're going to be like overly simplistic, moralistic stories, right? Like, think of the classic fables from history, right? Tortoise and the hare, where you're like, okay, but like this doesn't really apply to real life. No, honestly, the archetypes he creates in this fable I found to be so accurate based upon my time spent in the corporate world. And again, maybe the names are a little bit different, maybe their positions are a little bit different, but again, he hits upon very key archetypes here. So one archetype that I came across constantly in the pharmaceutical industry was in regards to our sales and marketing teams. And those individuals believing that essentially they walked on water, that they were the lifeblood of the business, that you need to get out of their way and essentially just do whatever they want to do. And while what we would see is sometimes these high performers for sprints of periods of time would overachieve, crush their goals and targets, it was really easy for them to fall off. And I think one of the reasons it was easy for them to fall off was if they weren't holding themselves accountable, no one else was. And there wasn't this sense of working together. So again, like, just do yourself a favor, whether you're currently in a leadership role or someday you dream. of being one, like, go consume this book, spend the 4 hours to listen to it, because I'm not going to do it enough justice here. But the archetypes that he lays out, I've literally met every single one of those people in real life. Like, it was spooky. And maybe just the pharmaceutical industry was designed exactly like high tech startups, because that's the example that he uses in this book, is around a team of individuals with a new CEO and the dysfunctions that come with that, right? That's one of the hardest parts, is when you're an outsider coming into a new team and you have to lead them, is it can be really easy for people to on the existing team to discount any value you can bring to it. She doesn't have the experience. She's never worked in this industry before. She doesn't even know us. She doesn't understand our inner functions or our team dynamics. She doesn't get the culture. And yeah, a lot of bad leaders will make those mistakes, but a good leader, as is kind of laid out in this example, will take the time to try and really understand. And one of the biggest lessons I personally took away from this was the idea of like a culture reset. And that's really what the main character here explores coming in as a new CEO to a corporation. Is she decides that she needs to completely build from the ground up. And I think for a lot of people, when they get into a leadership role, especially a new leadership role, it's easy to think that you need to be very reactive, just focus on a goal and push the team towards hitting like the metrics, right? But if you don't take a first principles approach to it, if we're not willing to really invest some time and energy into understanding the team dynamics, trying to improve them and get everyone in alignment, you're going to find yourself constantly coming against friction from your team members. They're not going to be heading in the right direction. Everyone's going to be individualistic and looking out just for themselves. So quickly wanted to highlight a few of the books that Patrick Lencioni has written before. So The 5 Temptations of a CEO, another great one I recommend. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, that's this book here. Death by Meeting, a leadership fable, another great one here about solving the most painful problem in business. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a quick read at under 4 hours and is a must read for any existing aspiring team leaders. So this graphic actually does a fantastic job of laying out the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So these are them here in the pyramid, and we kind of go in reverse order. So start at the bottom. So an absence of trust, a fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to result. And your role as a leader in regards to absence of trust is you need to set the standard, right? Is it more about saving face and covering your own ass, or are you willing to have the tough conversations? Are you willing to build trust through honesty? And if you are, then you need to go first as a leader. Next, fear of conflict. We need to mind conflict as leaders and understand that conflict's good, right? That idea of iron sharpens iron. That if we can actually be constructive in our criticisms, if we can actually explore complex and nuanced conversations, we can actually get to the bottom of what the real problems are. Versus, again, a fear of conflict. Well, I don't want to say something about them because they might attack me in my department. And again, I saw this play out so often where you get these weird, I'm going to call them unholy alliances between departments where sales and marketing are both not hitting their targets, but they decide to throw finance under the bus, or they decide to throw, whatever, fulfillment and logistics under the bus. And again, that's not actually focus on solving the underlying problems. Way too often we find ourselves trying to treat symptoms rather than the underlying cause of the issues. And, that's the case literally with pharmaceuticals. That's the case in any industry. Lack of commitment. So we need to force clarity and closure. So again, you can have open conversations. You should be able to have tough conversations with your team. But at the end of the day, we need to be very clear and concise in regards to what it is we're trying to accomplish. Far too often, and I've definitely made this mistake time and time again as leader, is taking the approach of, let's do better. Let's work harder. Let's make more money. Well, does that really create any sort of clarity? Or does that close the loop on any existing unclosed loops? No. It honestly just muddies the water. It maybe sounds nice in the moment, but it's not actually going to drive any sort of results. Next is the avoidance of accountability. So we need to confront difficult issues, and we need to be proactive in accountability. So again, there's that classic saying in management, like measure what matters and what's measured matters. And the whole idea there is that if you're not measuring it, if there's not a cadence of accountability, as we talked about in a previous Monday video where we were going over the 4 disciplines of execution. And again, I'm trying to take the best business books I've ever experienced and share them with you guys through these Mondays, because I know how life-changing they were for me. And I understand I'm still not a fantastic leader. I still make mistakes all the time. I still struggle with my businesses and entrepreneurship endeavors. However, imagine how much worse it would be if I hadn't spent the time investing in myself, trying to learn these hard lessons and be proactive. The final dysfunction of a team here is inattention to results. And so we need to, as leaders, focus on collective outcomes. So not just did this individual hit their individual metrics, but are they also helping push us towards, are they compelling us towards our collective goals? So the model starts at the bottom and you work your way up the top. So absence of trust. So a team must feel safe to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is where you're going to, if you can get people to be, to feel safe, to feel trusted, to feel heard, that's when they're going to be willing to open themselves up and be vulnerable. And that's when you can really make real differences and changes versus people just telling you what they think you want to hear. Vulnerability builds trust. So again, as a leader, owning up to maybe you don't have all the answers, to owning up that maybe there's macro environmental issues that are causing your business to struggle. That will still build a culture of trust in your organization if you're willing to tell it like it is. One person can destroy an entire team's trust. So this is also important. You can have 1 or 2 toxic personalities completely co-opt your message, completely drive your team off course. And so again, as a leader, we need to be willing to have conflict. So fear of conflict. Fake harmony stifles productive conflict and ideological differences. So it's much better to put the conflict out in the open and get to the bottom of it. That's how we can actually get people bought in and have commitment, is if we're willing to actually explore pushback, right? Are you willing to have those difficult conversations? No productive conflict means there is no trust. So again, these all build upon each other. So if you don't have any trust in your organization, you're only going to have fake harmony, because people aren't going to be willing to have real conflict. They're not going to push back on their peers. They're not going to push back on you. Now, again, this doesn't mean that just you allow someone to be like, this is bullshit, this is impossible, da, da, da. But if they've got real facts, you need to be willing to explore them. If you set a deadline and they're like, look, there's only 24 hours in a day, it takes us this long in a production cycle, you're asking us to, turn over this level, it's just physically impossible given the resources we have. Now, if you've got that fear of conflict in your organization, that individual is just going to be like, yep, they're just going to overpromise and underdeliver and hope that the consequences aren't that significant, or that they can pass the blame when the consequences come home to roost. Lack of commitment. Lack of commitment and fear of being wrong leads to no decisions or half decisions. This is honestly one of my biggest failures as a leader, is half decisions, where you half commit to something. And your team can sense that in you, right? They can sense if you're not all bought in on the mission. They can sense if you're half-assing it. And why would you expect your team to full-ass it if they sense that their leader's half-assed or half-bought into it? So again, lack of commitment. And if you don't have your trust, right? If you don't have an open conflict, right? If your team's not willing to be in open conflict in order to get to a real commitment, again, you're going to struggle as a team. You're going to miss massive opportunities. The best teams, the best organizations will either have intuitively figured this out, or they will proactively figured this out. People don't stick to decisions they've made. I think I actually wrote that wrong there. People don't stick to decisions they haven't made. So again, if you're not getting buy-in from your team, if they don't feel like they're allowed to push back on that goal, they will half-heartedly commit to that goal because they were never bought in. They didn't make the decision. You made the decision for them. Avoidance of accountability. So we would prefer to be nice than hold others accountable for their behavior. And I'm guilty of this. And honestly, it's a disservice to everyone in your organization, not even just the individual team member that you're being nice to avoid that cadence of accountability, but it sets a bad precedent for the rest of the team. All of a sudden, people are going to be more comfortable trying to place blame with each other versus looking inside and trying to focus on what is under my control. What could I actually do to put myself, to put my team, to put my business in a better position to succeed? Then finally, the inattention to results. So desire for individual credit rather than collective success. So Win as a team. There should be no other option. Win as a team. You need that collective success. Now, this is a really handy, essentially, cheat sheet from this book that I find just so helpful. So, if we're looking at a dysfunctional team, let's highlight some of the mistakes we're going to see in regards to an absence of trust. So, they're going to conceal weakness and mistakes. So, again, they're not going to trust each other to be open and honest, hesitate to ask for help, or offer constructive criticism. So again, no trust, no willingness to try and help each other because I can't trust you to reciprocate because we don't have that sort of culture here. Hold grudges, right? If there's an absence of trust, it's really easy for people to miscommunicate, misunderstand each other, and that's going to bleed into a toxic culture and a culture of grudges. Then dread meetings. So again, if we don't trust each other, if I don't trust that you've honestly got my best interest and this organization's best interest at heart, we're all going to dread the meetings because nothing's actually going to get accomplished in them because we're all just going to be mouthing along to something we don't really believe in. And then find reasons to avoid spending time together. So if you don't like your team members, if you actively dislike them, right? If going to meetings, if interacting with these individuals is the worst thing you can imagine, you're not going to be able to save this organization. Another great book, Bluefish, from I believe it's either Mike Sims or Steve Sims, the author. He talks about the chug test, and him and his wife were talking about their financial advisor and accountant and how it just didn't feel right. And finally, his wife asked him just point blank a question: would you be willing to chug a beer with him down at the pub? And her reason for asking that question was, well, if we don't like him enough, then we're not willing to like hang out with him for a single drink. What makes us think that we're going to be willing to have weird, hard, embarrassing questions with him? And it's a very, very simple and a very poignant point, in my opinion. If you're not willing to spend time with your team members, you're destined, that team is destined for failure. Now, a healthy team would be a trusting team. They're willing to admit weaknesses and mistake, right? They'll take ownership. They'll ask for help. They'll accept questions and input about their areas of responsibilities. So again, because there's a trusting environment, they're willing to trust that you're not trying to make them look bad, but you're actually trying to improve the business, right? You're trying to improve their department by exploring difficult ideas or whenever you decide to make suggestions or try and give help or feedback. They'll give the benefit of the doubt. So again, they're willing to trust that you've got the best of intentions here. And that goes a long way when you're working together on a team. Focus on results, not politics. And this, I've never been in a workplace where politics didn't play a factor. But I have been in workplaces where politics were the primary factor. And I've been in workplaces where politics were, a much lower priority oriented aspect of the business and team. In addition, offer and accept apologies without hesitation. So they're willing to own up and admit when they're wrong because they trust that you'll do the same when you find yourself in their position. And they look forward to meetings and other opportunities to work together. So again, if all the dogs are pulling the sleigh in the same direction, you're going to go a lot further faster than if everyone's trying to go their own way. Fear of conflict. Team meetings are boring. Back channel politics and personal attacks are permitted. Ignore controversial topics and waste time posturing and managing personal risk. A healthy conflict. Have lively, interesting meetings. Extract and exploit the ideals of all team members. Solve real problems quickly. Minimize politics and put critical topics on the table for discussion. So again, we should understand that if someone's having a difficult conversation with us, that shows a level of trust. And we should reciprocate that level of trust by really focusing on the subject matter and not taking things personally, right? Be willing to have those difficult conversations because on the other end of it, you're going to be a better team, more cohesive team. And if people feel that they can actually speak out and, say the difficult things out loud, they're going to take ownership when you guys finally come to a consensus and come to a decision. And that really leads into this next point here, failure to commit. So failure to commit creates ambiguity among the team about direction and priorities. Watches windows of opportunity close due to excessive analysis and unnecessary delay. It breeds a lack of confidence and fear of failure. Revisits discussions and decisions again and again, and encourages second guessing among team members. So again, if you're like, yeah, we're going to do this for now because it's the best thing available to us, but maybe something better will come along eventually. who's going to buy into that, right? Like, who's going to be willing to, put in the extra hours to show up to the office early? Who's going to be willing to go the extra mile if they don't believe that the leader and the rest of the team is bought into the same goal? Now, if you've got strong commitments, your team will create clarity around directions and priorities. So you can get really specific, like we talked about in the previous book from Monday, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Um, it aligns the entire team around common objectives. Again, it's fun to celebrate the wins as a team. Whereas if everything's viewed through the individual lens, I, as the one salesperson, I either win or lose solely based upon myself and not the input of my fellow team members. Again, why are people going to be strongly committed? Develops an ability to learn from mistakes, takes advantage of opportunities before competitors do. So again, you can move faster if you're willing to make strong commitments. Moves forward without hesitation. Honestly, you're the more time you add to a decision, the less likely you are to be committed to it, in my opinion. It is so easy to get off target, off on a tangent, if you're not just making hard and fast decisions. Again, the way to make those hard and fast decisions is to have the team trust each other, is to actually have the team be willing to push back and provide any feedback on what that decision is. And then finally, we can all come together because we all participate in the decision making process in an open and honest manner. It's so much easier for those team members to buy in and move forward. And then finally, changes direction without hesitation or guilt. So again, if you've got to pivot, be clear and open and honest about it, and your team will buy into it much easier, and you'll have a much better time making that hard decision, making that hard pivot. Next, avoiding accountability. So creates resentment among team members who have different standards of performance, encourages mediocrity. And again, that's a huge one, right? Where people are just like, I'm just going to stay in the middle of the pack. And as long as I'm not the worst performer, there's going to be no consequences. It's also a lot easier to miss deadlines if there's no accountability. Places an undue burden on the team leader as the sole source of discipline. Now, effective accountability ensures that poor performers feel pressure to improve, identifies potential problems quickly by questioning one another's approaches without hesitation, establishes respect among team members who are held to the same high standards, and avoids excessive bureaucracy around performance management and corrosive action. So again, accountability is key. If you guys struggle with accountability, circle back to that book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, because that cadence of accountability when it comes to your team meetings is just, it's such a clear way to make sure that you're all in alignment, right? That you're all bought in. And then finally, the last dysfunction of the team, not focused on results. So stagnant or fail to grow. Rarely defeats competitors. Loses achievement oriented employees. Encourages team members to focus on their own careers and individual goals. And you're easily distracted if you're not focused on results. Where collective results retains achievement oriented employees, minimizes individualistic behavior, enjoys success, and suffers failures acutely. And one quote I've always remembered is, you know, um, success shared is doubled and failure shared is halved. And, it's one of those little idioms that's really easy to listen and kind of nod along your head to. But again, with a team, if you're sharing the blame, it doesn't feel so daunting to be able to go back and fix things. Where if it's all one person's fault and everyone's just jumping on and dumping on that person, it's really easy for individuals to be like, fine, fuck it. I'm just going to focus on my career. I'm just going to pad my resume so I can move on to the next job. And again, we start to see people drift towards those individualistic tendencies. Whereas if we all celebrate the wins together, if we all come together as a team when we win, it's so much easier to be bought in and trust those individuals that we're all moving together in the same direction. And then benefit from individuals who subjugate their own goals, interests for the goal of the team, and avoids distractions. So again, this is a quick read, a quick listen of a book, but there's just so many great examples, and the storytelling in it is what I think will really allow you guys listening to this or watching the replay to buy into this concept. So again, if you're struggling with your team, if there's certain aspects that just aren't clicking, take some time, invest into yourself and your team by doing the homework, by reading books like this book from Patrick Lencioni, by being willing to do a culture reset, right? By being willing to lead from the front and focus on creating a higher trust environment, on being willing to have the right type of conflict in your organization by committing hard and clearly and specifically when it comes to commitments, no half-assing it. And then, have accountability. If someone's not living up to their commitment, we need to hold them accountable to that. And again, there's productive ways to do this and there's unproductive ways. And I think the examples in this book are very illustrative on what a good leader can do to put themselves in the best position to lead their team. And then finally, inattention to results. At the end of the day, results matter. That was one of the core values of my impact team, was results matter. And again, the reason that was so important for us to understand was, we can be high trust, we can be willing to have hard conflicts, we can make commitments, we can try and hold each other accountable. But at the end of the day, if we're not actually measuring and judging our success based upon those measurements, right, those results that we're driving, it's kind of all for naught. So again, love this book. Love a lot of the books that I've consumed from Patrick Lencioni. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. What are some of your favorite business books? I've consumed a lot over the years. I think another one that we'll likely do in the near future will be 0 to 1. That one's a much different of approach. There's also, I'm drawing a blank here. There's another great book too from the CEO of, starts with a Z, the shoe company. Anyways, there's so many great books on business. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. I also love Ben Horowitz's. He's got 2 books, very focused on culture when it comes to a business. If you're looking to really scale a large business, like focusing on the culture is so key. I think you can have a small team and hold it together just by sheer personality and sheer force. But if you really want to build something scalable, if you want to build something for the long term, focusing on the culture is absolutely key. And having a culture of teamwork is absolutely key, in my opinion. It's the reason why I want to share this book from Patrick Lencioni with you guys. If you guys do ever go back and read some of these books, leave us a comment on our Substack because I would really appreciate it. So again, we open up right now. All our comments, it's for free. So again, you don't have to pay to comment here. You don't have to pay to be a part of the Substack. But go over, leave us your thoughts, your opinions. If you guys actually do go and consume some of these books, I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what other business books are you guys currently consuming. I see Al is in the comments here sharing a book he's currently going through. The Art of Passing the Buck by Charles Arthur is a great business book. I've never heard it, so I'll make a little note here right now about The Art of Passing the Buck. Again, that feels like it's got a lot to do with accountability and probably viewing things through your personal lens of like, how can I do better? And that's absolutely a key element or a key ingredient into Best Day Ever, which is what this show is all about. So again, appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're currently watching this on any social media platform. We'll be back tomorrow and we'll cover another set of news stories in the last 24 hours. Then I'm going to be doing a deep dive into personal development. And spoiler alert, I think we're going to talk about the imposter syndrome. It's something that all of us struggle with. And yet I honestly think for a lot of people, the idea of the imposter syndrome is still an idea or concept they haven't been exposed to. And once you start to understand that no one's perfect, that everyone to a certain extent is faking it until they make it, or a better way than faking it is everyone's going through the motions before they get the success, right? That you have to commit to the process, you have to commit to the journey before you can actually get to the destination. So that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Appreciate you guys. Love our Best Day Ever family, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I don't have this set up right. Here we go.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right?